And guess what? The United States supply of gallium is zero. It doesn't have any. Where does it come from? China. As well as China has introduced some of its own missile systems into the Iranian arsenal to test them in a wartime environment. See how they work. You know, China's got all these missiles, and on paper they're supposed to work out on, the range, but they've not actually been tried in a combat environment. So this way they get the test. They get the Iranians are happy to fire them. They've got Chinese technicians which come in and help get them configured properly. And then they fire them against U.S. targets.
Welcome back, everyone. Larry Johnson joins us today, a former CIA analyst and former employee at the U.S. State Department's Office of Counterterrorism, who now also writes on Sonar 21, and I've left a link in the description. So thank you, Larry. It's great to see you again.
Professore, always a pleasure to be with you. You're on the cutting edge.
I try to be.
Yeah.
But, well, I guess the big news of the day seems to be that Iran and Oman are reportedly getting closer to an agreement on how to reopen shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. That is, allegedly the deal would entail that ships heading into the Persian Gulf would transit through the channel controlled or administered by Iran, while those who leave the Gulf will travel at the southern end near Oman. Again, there's a lot of secrecy around this thing, so I'm not sure if this is correct. But either way, it appears that these two sides are talking. In the past, the U.S. threatened Oman not to make a deal with the Iranians. Now it seems that the U.S. wouldn't mind it, that there comes some kind of a deal that opens up the strait. But of course, this will be a huge shift. Now Trump is talking about opening the Strait of Hormuz, but of course it was open. But if it reopens, it will be under partial Iranian administration, which is, I guess, a geopolitical defeat for the U.S. So, how do you see this? Because I remember once, a few weeks ago, Trump threatened to blow up Oman if they made such a deal. But of course, the situation in the international energy markets has changed a lot, and the U.S. position itself has changed.
Yeah, look, there's so much lying going on right now and denial about the economic realities, the economic damage that's been done. And with Trump insisting, oh yeah, no, we control the Strait of Hormuz. It's under our control. No, it's not. You could say that. You can say you also own a unicorn with magic flying abilities. You can say that, but that doesn't make it true. I would be surprised if Iran agrees to anything which limits its control over who goes in and out of the Persian Gulf right now. I think it has significant leverage over Oman with respect to coming up with a system that whatever, if ships are allowed to go out only through the Omani channel, they will have to pay a toll. And Oman will collect that toll, and Iran will be a recipient for a certain percentage of those fees. Likewise, if Iran is collecting fees off of ships coming in to the Persian Gulf, then Oman will be entitled to that. I think that'll be something about the nature of the deal. But look, Trump doesn't have a viable military option to open the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, no country or group of countries in the world have the viable military capability to force open the Strait of Hormuz without suffering significant maritime losses. Iran simply is too well entrenched, too well armed to be able to carry that off in a way that it would force Iran to back off. And what took place over the weekend, where Trump had vowed a massive campaign. Now, I'm not sure it would have compared with what was done in the early days of this war, I mean, what was done between the first 3-4 weeks, starting from February 28th. It was a significant, massive campaign, but turned out it did not weaken Iran. If anything, it strengthened Iran. So, and I know that the U.S. military, people I was in touch with, they were geared up. They thought this thing was going to jump off on Saturday night at about 6 p.m. Eastern time. Didn't happen. Trump pulled the plug. So the question is, why did he pull the plug? And I think it may be a combination of factors. One was reportedly he got a plea, insistent plea from Saudi Arabia saying, don't do it. Because Iran said, if you hit their power plants, if you hit their nuclear sites, they're gonna destroy ours. And the Saudis said, no, we don't want any of that. The other element, though, is the United States is running out of weapons. And they keep claiming, no, that's not the case. Nonsense. I just put a piece up at sonar21.com last night on gallium, the galling reality of the gallium chokehold. Because gallium is a critical mineral that is you can't build a fully functioning F-35 fifth generation fighter without it. And guess what? The United States supply of gallium is zero. It doesn't have any. Where does it come from? China. Gallium is a byproduct of aluminum production. The United States, when it moved away about 40 years ago from producing aluminum, let that production process go overseas to other countries, lost its ability to take that aluminum and extract the gallium from it. So now the United States is totally dependent upon China, and China is telling us with gallium, we're not giving you a damn ounce. And it's not just for F-35s, it's for precision strike missiles and other, we're out of PAC-3s, we're out of THAADs. They need gallium in those too. So the United States is now confronted with the situation where we want to use military force that we do not have. Or if we use it in any sort of sustained, intense fashion, we're going to deplete ourselves but to a level that we cannot replace it within the foreseeable future, 2 to 3 years. Not replaceable. And this is not me being alarmist. This is it's an absolute fact. And they refuse. They keep denying. They keep lying about, oh, no, we got plenty. No, you don't.
Yeah, the horrible thing is that the gallium is also used in those radars, which the Iranians have been blowing up across the Middle East. And I might get the numbers wrong, but I think about 99% of the gallium comes out of China. So
yeah,
well, that's real nice with China if you want to fight a war with China in the future, it seems. But Trump, as you said, he issued now, this final warning, he said. Well, he issues those every now and then. The final warning to Iran, now make a deal or, we'll annihilate you. And I guess all these rounds of attacks on Iran, the objective is to wear them down and, either capitulate or at least get a favorable deal out of them. But one gets the impression the opposite is achieved because, while, of course, Iran can be worn down a bit, you see these continued attacks on Iran, it suddenly makes them not believe in diplomacy anymore for good reasons. As you said, the energy markets and global economy also goes from bad to worse. So
right.
Though the Iranians are getting advantage, and as you suggested, every round of attacks, the U.S. depletes its weapon stockpile. So, and the Iranians know this. So if the U.S. is going to play hardball with the Iranians, they know there's a limit to what the U.S. can do now. So it seems as if all of this escalation, it could have the opposite effect. But what do we actually know, though, specifically about how bad the weapons, the lack of weapons are? I mean, I guess it's hard to have accurate information given that I assume there would be some secrecy around this.
Well, yeah.
What weapons are missing?
So you can go to open source. So I wrote about this. People can go back and look at March 3rd of this year at sonar21.com. And I went through the open source because the open source regarding the PAC-3 missile, the Patriot missile. And we know from open source that from 2015 to 2020, so that's 6 years, the United States was producing, it said, between 100 and 300 a year. So just for the sake of estimate, I said, let's go with 300 every year. Let's give it the full benefit of the doubt, man. We were maxing it out. Then for 21, 22, 23, 24, those 4 years, they produced 500 a year. Okay, so that's 2,000 plus 1,800. So that's 3,800. And then in 2025, I think the number was that they produced like 620. So, that takes you up to like 4,220, 4,260. That's the maximum. So that was as the end of 2025. Okay. Then you start doing subtraction. How many missiles were given to Ukraine that they fired? Remember, every time they fire a PAC-3, they're firing 2 against one incoming target. Estimated they gave Ukraine roughly 1,000. Okay, so we go from 3,600 down to, or 4,600 down to 3,600. How many were given to Israel and used by Israel during the 12-day war? Well, in June of 2025. Take off another 800. How many have been used in the course of the first 42 days of this war this year, and then over the last few weeks? Guarantee at least 1,500. And then out of that, look at that total 4,620 number, at least 1,500 of those had gone to foreign. So they're out. For all practical, they're out. They can pretend, oh yeah, we got plenty. Nonsense. They don't. And it's not a matter of just turning to Lockheed Martin, flipping the switch. Say, okay, y'all build us some more, because they need the rare earth minerals. I can't. I want to beat this into people's heads. This is so critical to understand. It's just not a matter of, do we have the willpower to make it? Yeah, you may have the willpower, but you don't have the material you need. And then on top of it, apparently, the PAC-3 missile has got like 20 or more subcontractors that each make like one little part. Then each part has to be tested. So, getting them assembled becomes a multi-year process. I mean, it's insane. So, the United States can pretend, and same with Tomahawks. Right now, they're saying the United States has about 2,000 left. All I can say is what we know for certain is during the first 5 weeks of the war that started on February 28th, the United States fired 850, according to U.S. sources. So that got that down to 2,000. And remember, that's 2,000 for the entire Department of Defense, all the regional commands, for Pacific Command, for European Command, for Central Command. I don't think they give any to Africa Command, or Southcom, the South America or South Central America Command. But if you take 2,000 and divide it 3 ways, that means PACOM's got 750, roughly. That Central Command has 750, and EUCOM has 750. PACOM says, hey, we need it in case we have to go to war with the Chinese. And the European Command says, hey, we got to have it in case we have to go to war with Russia. And so, if CENTCOM burned through 850 in 5 weeks, they're left with 750 now. Tell me about how long you can sustain an intensive campaign. So, I mean, it's like the United States has created a system that is so counterproductive that it cannot meet its own defense needs anymore. The supply chains are dependent upon China principally. And notice Iran doesn't face those obstacles. Iran's supply chains are secure with China and with Russia. And they can build whatever it needs underground and has been building underground. And it's not having to worry about going out and competing, having different publicly traded companies compete to build it, and quote, you never get it built properly.
But for the Iranians, the long-term I guess, ticket for security would be, I mean, if I was Iranian, I would want to essentially destroy the entire U.S. military ecosystem of the region. That is, they have bases again, across the Gulf states. There will always be this incentive to build up an alliance. And indeed, this is not advocacy. I'm just saying, if I was Iranian, I see the security situation being in their shoes. This is how I would see it, that this should be the long-term path for security. Now, you can achieve this through some means. You can, of course, control the Strait of Hormuz and put some geoeconomic pressure on the Gulf states to scale back their security partnership with the United States. Or you could just destroy all the bases and, essentially make it clear to the U.S. that its bases in the region are vulnerable. They're not an asset, they're a vulnerability. And also signal to the Gulf states that their countries will not be more secure, but they will be more exposed. If that message comes across, the U.S. would have an incentive to, I guess, pull back a bit. I'm not sure if they can move everything to Israel, but it's essentially get rid of the bases in the near proximity of Iran. Because this will also shift the politics of the region by having U.S. bases, as we also see in Europe. But do you see how do you see the likely success of that objective? Because it is quite a grand objective, one has to say. I mean, the U.S. military is the most formidable in the world.
Well, I disagree. It's the most expensive in the world. Expensive and formidable are two different things. We've already demonstrated the limits of the power of the U.S. Navy. On paper, yeah, man, you've got this powerful, these aircraft carriers, strike groups, man, who can stand against them? The Houthis. They demonstrated that over the course of 18 months, starting in December of 2023, once they declared a shutdown, basically, of normal ship traffic through the Red Sea. And then, the first Operation Prosperity Guardian tried to stop them. And then Trump said, oh, no, we're not a bunch of wimps and weaklings like Biden. We're going to show you Trump's in charge now. And so Trump launched the new initiative, Operation Rough Rider, back in March of 2025. And 7 weeks later, after losing one MQ-9 Reaper per week, and each one goes for a tune of about $65 million apiece, so they came close to losing almost $500,000 worth of Reapers, and then 3 F-18s that, under different, one fell off the ship, one got damaged by friendly fire, who knows what happened to the other one. And those aircraft come up to probably another 300 million combined. So it's all of a sudden you're out almost $1 billion. And Trump's declared, the Houthis have capitulated. We're going home. The rest of the world saw it for what it was. The United States didn't compel them militarily to surrender, not at all. So what has transpired, despite the promises of the United States to the Gulf Arabs, we got your back. We're here to defend you. Come on, trust us. Who can withstand us? And now here those guys are 5 months later into this war going, looks like Iran can withstand you. Not only can Iran withstand you, Iran has forced you out, and you have been unable to protect us. You've been unable to defend us. You promised us these air defense systems that don't work. You had to spend billions of dollars on your military equipment that doesn't work. We're less secure, not more secure now. And the United States, how's it replied? It's abandoned those bases. In Al Udeid, it used to be it was the de facto forward headquarters of AFCENT, Air Force Central Command. It's, the nominal base was in South Carolina, but the actual, the general, commanding general, the staff, all the activity, it was there forward at Al Udeid because they had this massive $1 billion plus radar, a couple of other radars. They were able to see everything in the area. They were on top of it. And just before the start of the war, the Central Command, Bubba's went, you know what? It's going to be too exposed there. We better get these guys out. They relocated it all to Shaw Air Force Base. But they thought, hey, we still got the coverage of radar. And within the first 2 weeks, Iran had destroyed the radar. So now they're blind. Now they're dependent upon AWACS and Poseidon 8s to give them ISR information because the ground radars are gone. They're history. And they're not coming back soon. Because you know what? They too need gallium and other rare earth minerals. And the Chinese are saying, no, we're not selling you that. So the United States has been effectively run out of the Gulf. And I think much to the surprise and shock of the Saudis, Qataris, Bahrainis, etc. They keep trying to figure out how to rope the United States back in, but the United States does not have the abilities to sustain military operations at those forward locations.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Given that the technologies now are quite different, that is the ballistic missiles and drones of Iran cannot target the bases. I mean, these US bases were not built for these technologies because they can't protect them. All these fancy, expensive radars, I mean, they just became very attractive targets for the Iranians. So you see this being a problem. You see setting that region on fire has some profound implications for the world economy. You see the US weapons stockpiles being depleted. And as you said, there's no convincing pathway to a military victory in which the Iranians will then capitulate and agree to have their state destroyed. So, there's no way of even opening the Strait of Hormuz. And given all of this, at some point, Trump will have to, circle back from, I'm going to destroy Iran to, negotiations are going great. So at some point, they will go back, have to talk to the Iranians. How do you see the pathway to diplomacy go now? Because they just got the MOU and Trump, began to dispute the key points in the MOU, hours after it was signed. So,
right.
But again, the Iranians don't trust the Americans, but at some point they do have to talk to them as well. And Iran has some interest, I guess, in terms of getting sanctions relief or, whatever the US might be willing to offer or reparations. So how do you see diplomacy playing out again? Because again, if I was Iranian, I would want to talk to the Americans, but I wouldn't trust them for a second. So how would those negotiations look like?
Well, you've got the Trump public negotiation, which starts with these threats and attempt to coerce the Iranians, and then his famous taco move, as they're calling it. Trump always chickens out. There's a diplomatic impasse right now. The impasse is this: the Trump team's position is Iran must negotiate on the nuclear issue first and foremost, before anything else. They've got the Trump team needs a victory to show that, okay, we've got, basically going back to the JCPOA. That's all it is. Iran said, no, we're not going to negotiate anything about any nuclear issue, whether it's enrichment or the possibility of building a nuclear weapon, until you fulfill the MOU, which means Israel withdraws from southern Lebanon, you lift the blockade, you lift the sanctions, you unfreeze the assets, and you acknowledge that we've got control of the Strait of Hormuz. That's it. And right now, the United States is not willing to do that. But the problem Trump is going to face it's going to be on the economic front. They've been able to mitigate, cover up so far the actual effect on diesel, aviation fuel. They've been able to pretend that, everything's okay, but it's not okay. And the international financial market is not okay. The dollars on the international market is not okay. People aren't lining up to buy the dollars, just the opposite. Whereas the Chinese are in a much stronger position. They've been buying gold like mad and stockpiling gold. Why? Because they're going to have a gold-backed currency. And when people around the world are looking to invest, do you want to invest in the United States where you just got Donald Trump's promise, we'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today? Or do you go with the Chinese and say, hey, ours is gold-backed? You buy it, you got guaranteed for, each dollar will have X amount of value on gold, depending on what the gold market is. So China is rapidly moving, along with Russia. They're building up the whole BRICS economic infrastructure. And, the United States is going to have to contend with that because the impact of the shutdown of the Persian Gulf right now, it's a global economic impact. Now, China, for its effort, on one hand, is trying to mitigate that because they depend upon exporting to the global south. But at the same time, they've shown no indication that they're going to abandon Iran and force Iran to surrender to the United States. Just the opposite. Because the Chinese recognize as well, they're next on the menu. If Iran goes down, if Russia goes down, China's next on the menu. And they understand this. So they're playing, they're planning for it and are prepared to deal with that. That's where, the United States hasn't even planned for this. We thought, oh, well, the supply of rare earth minerals, that'll take care of itself somehow. And any solutions are, a good 3 to 5 years away for the West. So I think the economic realities are ultimately going to be what's going to compel Trump. He's going to have to make concessions to Iran that will, basically establish Iran as a winner in this confrontation. It'll drive the neocons and the Zionists crazy, but it's not like the United States lacks the will to use military power. It doesn't have the military power to use in a way that it's willing to incur the losses that would accompany its use.
My last question, though, was just about, as the U.S. military capabilities are diminishing in the region, we see also different development, which is quite interesting. That is also reported in the Western media, who have no love for Iran, which points out that Iranian missile capabilities appear to be increasing. Mm-hmm. You would think at the end of the war they would be getting worse, but you see, even the larger papers in the U.S. recognizing that the missiles are getting faster, they are able to evade missile defense to a greater extent, and they're getting much more deadly. How do you explain this? I mean, I've seen some leading hypotheses that the Chinese and the Russians are assisting in picking targets, etc. And again, if I was Chinese or Russian, I would be definitely helping. Otherwise, those weapons would be coming for me. So, yeah. Well, I would see a common cause with the Iranians. But are there any other explanation? How do you explain this? The enhanced capabilities of the Iranians?
Well, there are a couple of several factors. Number one, and during the 12-day war in 2025, Iran relied upon GPS for targeting its missiles, and discovered only to its chagrin that the United States and Mossad could backdoor the GPS and actually divert missiles from their intended targets. So that reduced the effectiveness of Iranian missile launches in that 12-day war in 2025. By the start of the war this year, on the 28th of February, Iran had moved to the Beidou system, the Chinese system for targeting, and it has proved much more effective. It is immune from U.S.-Israeli hacking, and so they've been very effective in the targeting. That's number one. Number two, the Iranian missile factories, they're underground. They built them underground expressly to resist the possibility of a nuclear attack, and they have uninterrupted supply chains from Russia and China, plus what they produce on their own. So they're able to continue whatever they're using and launching. They're actually able to replace some of it in fairly close short order. Third, they are getting targeting data and assistance from both Russia and Chinese intelligence, as well as China has introduced some of its own missile systems into the Iranian arsenal to test them in a wartime environment. See how they work. China's got all these missiles, and on paper they're supposed to work out on the range, but they've not actually been tried in a combat environment. So this way they get to test. They get the Iranians are happy to fire them. They've got Chinese technicians which come in and help get them configured properly, and then they fire them against U.S. targets. And that way they come away and say, "Hey, that works, that doesn't work, this is the problem. So it's both sort of R&D for future conflict, let's call it that.
It almost sounds like you're describing what the NATO's been doing in Ukraine, because there as well you see their different NATO countries, arms manufacturers get to test out their new weapons against the Russians, and then also, so they get to develop weapons and test them, but also at the same time they get to weaken a strategic rival. I guess it would be expected if China does the exact same thing.
Correct.
Because, well, the NATO countries can't keep setting dates for a war with Russia and planning for a future war with China and expect them to just sit idly by and allow the NATO countries to decide when the war will be waged upon them. So I guess, yeah, they would do the exact same. Anyways, any final thoughts before we finish off?
Hey, this I think we're going to see some more back and forth. I think potentially today or later we'll see U.S. retaliating for the attacks in Kuwait, and then Iran will retaliate in turn for that. So this back and forth. The claims that the Trump administration is making is that we got advanced talks and we're going to get the Strait of Hormuz open. I wouldn't go to the bank and bet on that.
No, but the desperation is definitely setting in, and that's usually not a good thing. Then people deal with things. Anyways, Larry, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Hey, Professor, good to be with you. Thanks, Glenn.
大家好，我是主播周玉琴。很多的朋友告诉我们，选择原版的太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌，它添加有羽衣甘蓝，健康再加分。而有睡眠困扰的朋友们，赶快选择蓝色包装这一款晚安加强版，绝对是更有感。每日克菲尔，时刻美好 ，Good Feel Good， 请上快点购为健康下单，而且要记得输入推荐代码，有额外的折扣优惠。 太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌基础版、晚安加强版新包装改版，内容不变，抽取更方便。要吃就吃最好的。